Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, April 13th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. So today we'll start off with Our Lady of Mantua. We're told that it goes back to 1640. 1640 is the year that it was crowned. However, we're not exactly sure what it has to do with April 13th, but that's okay. So the present shrine that's dedicated to Our Lady of Mantua was built by the Gonzaga family in 1460. Now there's a miraculous painting of the Blessed Virgin holding the child Jesus that's been venerated there since around the year 1000, right? Originally known as Saint Mary of the Vows, the painting, it says, was crowned today, but as further research indicates, maybe it was actually crowned in November, but that's okay. So according to tradition, the history of that location dates back to St. Anselm. At that time, the Blessed Virgin promised her protection for the city. So starting in 1477, word began to spread that numerous miracles had taken place before the image. And so then substantial votive offerings began to pour into the church. And sometimes that's why the church is named, that is why the church is named as Santa Maria dei Voti, Our Lady of the Vows, or votive offerings, right? So after the plague of 1630, which overwhelmed the city and the territory, the princess, Maria Gonzaga, wanted to entrust herself, her reign, and the state to the protection of the Blessed Virgin Mary, right? So she desired that the image of Our Lady be carried in procession throughout the streets of the city, and then that it be solemnly crowned in the Basilica of Sant Andrea, and crowned as Queen of Mantua, right? The solemn crowning of Our Lady, Santa Maria dei Voti, was strongly urged by the princess in 1640, right, when the dam of the Po River in Italy broke. So the coronation took place that year, 1640, on November 28th, right? And since then, the church earned another name. Santa Maria dei Voti was also known as dell'Incoronata, St. Mary the Crowned, right? And so the annual festival was fixed on the first Sunday after the feast of St. Martin, which is November 11th, right? So it's very beautiful and a long-standing tradition that is still, even to this day, kept up. Next, we'll jump over to France, where they say Notre Dame in Épernay, Marne, Grand Est, France. So what is the importance here? Well, this celebrates the consecration, or the reconsecration, we could say, of the church. So it's a Gothic-style church dedicated to Our Lady, the patroness of the town, which was built to replace one damaged in 1892, and that was eventually destroyed in 1909. They just tore it all down, right? Although they laid the first stone in 1898, and they started worshipping at it in 1907, it wasn't finished until 1915. But unfortunately, if you're aware of world history, on the night between July 24th and 25th, 1918, a bombardment destroyed the vaults of the church and damaged the facade. The restored church wasn't finally consecrated until April 13th, 1925, right? So the church is known because it has a stone statue of the Virgin and Child from around the year 1200, which is thought to have come from Notre Dame in Paris, right? We're also told that the Church of Notre Dame de Chardevais in Jussac, Chantal, Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes in France was consecrated on this day in 1886. There's no further information, unfortunately. And then to round up our celebrations today, we also recall Madonna del Pianto, Our Lady of the Tears, in Albino in Bergamo. So it was on this day, April 13th, 1655, that a poor young child who brigands had cut his tongue in order that he might not reveal a crime that he had seen, was praying to Our Lady when all of a sudden his tongue was miraculously restored and given back the gift of speech, right? So again, this took place around the year 1651. This poor child, Paolo Bignoni di Gerardo, because he was a poor child, at the age of 10, he would go out and work as with a shepherd in a nearby town, right? And while he was taking the sheep out to pasture one day, he innocently, and just like the people didn't notice, but he witnessed a horrible crime. Some brigands, some thieves, were armed. They robbed a poor man. They took all of his stuff and they left him covered with wounds, and so much so that he eventually died, right? And so these maldoers were getting ready to flee when they realized that Paolo had seen them from a distance, and that because the guy was probably going to die, that he would denounce them to the authorities. And so what did they decide to do? Well, they got up to him, they beat him up, and even though he was crying, they cut off his tongue, right? So he couldn't speak anymore. So the poor child went around begging for bread, and he realized that nothing human could help him. So then eventually he went with his father to Fiorano, his father was a very devoted Christian. So what did they do? They went, it was September 18th, it says here. Here it says it was September 18th, 1655. They knelt in this little chapel and they prayed the 3 Our Fathers and Hail Marys, and he told his son, well, just, repeat it in your head. And then after that, they added the creed. And as soon as the creed was done, the child realized that his mouth was filled as with drops of honey. And at the same time, he felt his tongue return. And so he was so surprised that he let out a shout of joy and began to speak, right? So they were very, very happy. Turns out that, his tongue was completely restored. The miracle was verified by the bishop of the place. And he got married at the age of 29. He lived for another 38 years, and he died piously at the age of 54, right? Always deeply grateful to Our Lady of Sorrows, his heavenly benefactor. And so that's what we're celebrating today in the Marian world on April 13th. For today's Marian meditation, taken from the book by Father Ildefonso Villar, we continue with meditation 55 on the life at Nazareth. As you recall, several of these meditations have this name, Life at Nazareth, but this one is particularly focused on the growth and development of Jesus. So let's consider today's second point, the model. Jesus advanced in wisdom and in grace, says the Gospel. Jesus appeared to grow and advance, yet in reality, he was the only one in no position to increase or grow. For from all eternity, he possessed all in an infinite degree. Consequently, he could not acquire any new perfection. Yet, since he wanted to be our model and teach us practically that we must grow, he so manifested himself as to appear to be advancing and growing. The sun is always the same. It does not increase or decrease, yet its light grows from dawn to midday in intensity and brightness. So did Jesus daily intensify the brightness of some perfection, as though perfection were really growing and increasing in him. How great must be the desire of God that we should grow, since his divine Son, the only one not susceptible of increase, decides on appearing in a constant development. He certainly wants us to imitate him and to work at our own perfection. Our Lady, the one who drew most profit from the teachings of Jesus, certainly did follow his example. It is sweet for us to think how she every day appeared more graceful and beautiful in the sight of God and of man. For today's reading from The Admirable Heart of Mary by St. John Eudes, we continue with Part 8, which talks about the holiness of Mary's heart as a foundation of this devotion. And in Chapter 1, we're considering the heart of Mary as immaculate and sinless. Let's see what St. John Eudes has to say. To assert that the Mother of God was conceived in sin is to prefer your private opinion to that of the apostles, in particular St. Andrew, St. James the Less, and St. James the Greater. The glorious apostle St. Andrew, at the hour of death, expressed himself as follows. As the first Adam was formed out of the earth before it was cursed by God, so the second Adam was formed from the virginal flesh, never sullied by the curse of heaven. That is from a writing, apparently a collection of the sayings of St. Andrew. The apostle St. James the Less makes a special mention of the mother of his divine master, calling her most holy, immaculate, blessed above all creatures, more honorable than the cherubim, more glorious than the seraphim, always blessed, and altogether irreproachable. And again, from another collection that's from looks like the liturgy of St. James. St. Ctesiphon, the disciple of St. James the Greater, called the mouth of the great apostle, has left us the doctrine taught by the apostles themselves. This virgin, this Mary, this Holy One, has been preserved from original sin from the first moment of her conception. Never would the angel have said to Mary, "Hail, full of grace," if she had been conceived in original sin. To refuse to believe in Mary's exemption from original sin is to show a lack of respect and submission to the sovereign pontiffs, Alexander VI, Julius II, Leo X, Paul V, and Gregory XV, who authorized the doctrine of Mary's pure conception by recommending that a feast be kept in its honor, and by approving its office. Some of these pontiffs even went so far as to forbid, under pain of excommunication, any opposition to this teaching either by word of mouth or in writing, in public or in private. To uphold that Mary was not conceived immaculate is to believe that one has more light than the many cardinals, patriarchs, archbishops, and bishops from all parts of the world who favor the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. It is to place oneself above the fathers of the Holy Church and all the religious orders of St. Anthony, St. Basil, St. Benedict, the orders of the Cistercians, the Carthusians, the Franciscans, the Dominicans, the Society of Jesus, the Barnabites, the Theatines, and others that testified great zeal and ardor in defending the Holy Mother of God from the stigma implied in the fact that she was numbered among the children of wrath and malediction. To contradict the belief of the Catholic Church is to condemn the famous universities of Paris, Cologne, Mainz, Valencia, Salamanca, Coimbra, Barcelona, Sevilla, Krakow, and nearly all the other universities of Christendom that refused to grant the degree of Doctor of Theology until the candidate bound himself by oath to maintain the innocence of Mary's conception.
Hello, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to our Marian podcast. In the spirit of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, we say to you that there is no greater delight than to spread the devotion of Our Lady. We hope you share these sentiments and encourage you greatly to share with a loved one. Know that you are always in our prayers, and we ask that you keep us in yours. God bless.